Hello and welcome to another free code session. My name is Jason Bach and I am switching gears. I'm going to start working on something completely different. This was an idea that I had. This is getting near the end of December and I had this right around Christmas time. I was doing some learning of Python just to get my head around some general concepts, nothing real deep. Actually, I want to spend more time on F# in the coming year than anything else in terms of other languages that I use on a daily basis, like C#. But in any event, I had run across partial function application in Python. I had seen this before. I think F# has it. I know Pony has it. And it's an interesting concept. It's kind of like, oh, you can say, I have a function that takes 3 arguments. I want the first one to be this value, and then use that all the time when you call this new function. So hence partially apply. It's an interesting idea. I don't really know how applicable it is in a lot of circumstances, but the thing that tripped in my head is, can you do this in C#? And if you can't, well, could I create something that would? And it took me a little while to figure out what I think I might need to do. Part of it was looking up previous literature or previous attempts at this, and there are some out there. The thing is that they all use func and action, as far as I can tell. So they're limited by that. Though why you'd have a function take more than 16 arguments is beyond me. You probably really don't want to do that. But you're also limited to types that can only be expressed in a generic, which for the vast majority of cases is perfectly acceptable. It's not a problem. But as you saw with all my previous videos in rocks, span types, ref struct types, generics, pointers, they don't work. So if you do have those cases, then you can't do that. And I'd like to be as open as possible. So I started diving into it and I thought, well, could I do something with source generators? Could that possibly allow me to generate something that I could use that partially applies things? And it took a lot of just back and forth and thinking things through and wondering, could I do this? The biggest problem is that, well, there's a couple of them. And I'll go through the examples you'll see here in a moment because I haven't actually done this yet. This is just my experimentation. But is to figure out what's being passed into you and then create the appropriate delegates. But we only want to create delegates for method types that we haven't seen before and uniquely identify things and blah, 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 blah. So it was a bunch of problems that came up in my head and I didn't necessarily know how to solve them. But it was also interesting because I put this problem on ice for just a couple of days and just let my brain kind of think things through and ruminate and wonder. And then I came back to it a couple of days ago and I'm like, I think I can do this. And I did more and more examples and I'm like, yeah, now it's just a matter of actually writing a source generator to do this, which of course is not trivial, but I'm like, I've done enough with rocks for now. I've done so many videos on rocks and source generators are still cool to me. I didn't intend to necessarily do something that had to do something with source generators. But this was just kind of can I actually do this? This is always going to be an experiment to me because I don't know how well this is going to hold up to people using this over time. But I thought, let's give it a whirl. Let's give it a try. Let's see if we can actually get something to work reasonably well. As I've mentioned, I'm doing this over my vacation, which has gone by way too fast. I took Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday was off for Christmas. And then this week I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday's also off for New Year's Day because it's New Year's Eve right now. No, New Year's Eve is tomorrow, and then Friday we have off. So I've taken nearly 2 weeks off, and I'm like, I only have 5 days left. What the hell? It just went by really, really fast. But at the same time, it's and will be. It's been very just relaxing, sitting around, reading, watching videos. My kids got me the video games Limbo and Inside, which I've seen people play through before, but I didn't really remember them other than the ending of Inside is really, really just ugh. You have to see it if you haven't played it. Both of them are really good games. I highly enjoyed both of them, and they're making a sci-fi. It's not a side scroller. I've heard it is actually 3D, and I'd play that in a heartbeat. The people that made that game, those games have a style that is weird, dystopian, creepy, and it's engaging. They're very well done. It was a reminder of it's so important in games to have something that's cohesive, that works well, that tells you a story that has no words. And Limbo worked and Inside worked really, really well in that the whole imagery, style, everything worked so well to tell you a story that's not all fully explained at the end anyway, but really well done. Really well done. So it's been fun just to do what you do on a vacation, which is relax, relax. Oh, come to the coast, relax, have a few laughs. I think that's from Die Hard, and we watched Die Hard with the family. And I haven't seen Die Hard in a very, very long time. And I'm surprised at how well it worked. To me, it was still it's a good movie. There's some things that are a little, one-dimensional, like the FBI agents, although the Agent Johnson, no, the other one. It's like, because they're both Agent Johnson. And then the LAPD deputy head or whatever his name was, he came across as too, just like kind of those characters weren't fleshed out the greatest. But overall, the movie was really, really good and just very, very entertaining. And it was fun to watch that with the family. So it's been a good vacation, and I plan on still doing some stuff like this. So let me get back to this, and I'm going to now do some episodes. Again, I don't know if this will take me 3 to 10 to 20 to actually do this. But I do have a plan in place to some degree, so I kind of know where to go with this. It's just now a matter of, as I learned from the movie Aliens, all we need is a deck of cards. So the idea is that, let's say you had a class like maths. Can't use math because there's a math class. And you have a multiply function. And what you want to do is create a tripler. So what you want to say is, I want to basically say that you're going to take whatever number, you pass it into tripler, and you would end up doing something like, tripler of 7. Okay. And that what that actually would produce is 21. Okay. Now, there is no partially apply. Okay. That doesn't exist. So what the source generator is going to do is look for places where you're trying to invoke a function called apply from a class called partially. Even though those things, there's literally going to be no class to start off with like that. So I've got to detect that and now say, okay, well, what are you passing in? What is your function? And then how many arguments are you passing in? And make sure that you have that the function that you're trying to partially apply actually has 2 or more arguments. It doesn't make sense if you have 1, because why would you? I mean, I guess you could do it, but it doesn't really make sense to me that to have a function with 1 argument where you're going to pass in the same value. Just code that and say you're going to pass in that value. So that doesn't really, you want to do partial. That would be fully applied if you want to think of it that way. So you got to have at least 1 argument to a function that takes at least 2 arguments, but you can't specify them all either, because again, that's the whole thing. You'd be fully applied, and that would be not the point. So I'm going to have to do some checks and diagnostics on that, but let's just go happy path. Okay. So That's the intent. Now, of course, how do you actually do this? Well, the pass here, what I'm trying to show is what would actually be generated by the source generator. Well, we generate a partial class because we're probably going to create n of these. We don't know. And I'm also kind of curious to wonder, am I going to have to create the whole invocation of the generator and the file, quote unquote, the file that it creates, and do they run multiple times? Are they in parallel? Or, it's a little confusing to me. But again, as an experiment, I think I'm just going to keep everything in one file. We'll see if that works or not. I might have to actually create random numbers for files or whatever. Point is, I have a backup approach if this doesn't work. But the point is what would get generated is something like this, where it looks at the function signature and says, oh, you're returning an int. You're taking two arguments that are ints. Okay. And what's going to come out of the apply, sneeze, but I cut that out. What's going to come out of the apply is another delegate that just takes the second value, b. Okay. So what would it would generate then is a function apply that takes a multiply delegate, the first argument, whatever that is. And now here's, it's funny how source generators is this new thing, but how I'm using a bunch of other features that are already in C#. And I'm still amazed if this is going to work because it feels very elegant to me. And I'm not usually a great developer in terms of elegance. I don't know. That's an achievement that I try to hit, but not everything's elegant. This was like, wow, this actually does work, which is I want my local function here to actually capture A. Now you can do local functions that you put static on it and then it says you can't close over variables. But in this case, that's exactly what I want to do. And this is one of the things I got hung up on. It's like, well, what happens with the values that are coming in? How do I capture them? How do I store them? And I went, wait a minute, C# already does this for me. Why would I ever not use this feature? So I said, okay, whatever gets passed in as a B is what's going to get passed into whatever method you pass in here. I don't care where it's from. It could be, I guess, an instance or a static, whatever. As long as that function matches the delegate signature here, we'll call it here. Okay. Now, what you gave me as an A to start is actually, in this case, would be like up here was a 3. Okay. But the other full application would be the other value, B. And so this is a function. And now I actually return that multiply apply here as an instance of multiply apply delegate. That's why I could call it up here. Okay. So, and I've done tests on this, like actually in code, just putting this code in like a console app and running this. And it works as expected, which is really surprising to me. I felt it was going to be a lot more work than all I really need is two delegates, the apply method, and a local function and returning it. Now, of course, the names here end up having to be more generic. I have to, I'm probably going to have to create them with, I think I use the word base. I might use the word partial underscore identifier underscore delegate, partial underscore identifier underscore apply delegate. The reason why is I need to, like, you may give me as you're going through these examples, like here's what would happen with the generator. Okay. And then the third pass is, well, now I added a function here called add. Okay. Where I already have a multiply delegate before. What I really need is this one to be used in both cases because it's the exact function signature I'm looking for. It doesn't matter where it's been defined on. It's the function itself that matters. Okay. So the name multiply really doesn't work here. I want something that's going to be more general. Okay. And then what happens if I was like doing a fifth pass where I'm actually saying I want to do sums here and then I only had this one here, would I actually be able to do that? And so I've been doing a whole bunch of code analysis and where I build it look at what's actually there. Can I find the argument, which is the expression, as a call to some method, and then get that as a method symbol? And if I can, here's the trick while you're seeing a was found or not, is because if C# is actually able to bind, like it can up, let's say here, once the generator would generate this, this should actually work because this is now a legit call. And so when you're trying to look up the symbol, in this case, it just works. In the case where you're doing something like this, this is where C#'s compiler is kind of nice in that it will try to keep doing as much as it can, even in the face of errors. So what it will do here is it go, oh, you still are trying to call this maths multiply. You're still trying to pass in an int of 3, but I have no idea what this is. And so what it says is this overload resolution failure. It gives some error. But then what you can do is look at, if I go back down here, you can look at here and say, well, I think this is a candidate symbol, so I might have one in here. And if this first one is actually a method, then that's what I'm going to return. So that was kind of a nice, it was a good observation I made to look at what's actually there when you do get symbol info, to go, oh, in this case, it's actually there. It's still considered an error, but I can use this and then build up the function and then it would resolve. Okay. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour of what I'm going to try to be building over the next couple of episodes, which is, again, if I just show you here, I have to look at what's being passed in, what you want to partially apply, what are the delegates that you already have generated, and how many do you need to generate, give them unique names. And the names don't matter. Like if you would eventually, like if you actually looked at what's being passed in the partially apply down here, you would notice that that says multiply delegate or whatever. That doesn't really matter. The name doesn't matter as long as it does the right thing. If you're going to look at IntelliSense, or if you would really want to type this out, well, for one thing, you can't until the source generator would actually generate the delegates for you. And then you could say, okay, now I'm going to put this as a name, but you really don't want to do that. This is where var comes in very handy. You don't want to actually use the type name here because it's like an anonymous type in a way. With LINQ, the name of the anonymous type is you don't know. You don't know the name of this coming out either. So you have to use var in this case, really. Or just create a delegate which would match what's coming out. And then you could put the, not strongly type, but put the name of the type there if that's what you really, really want to do. But that's blah to me. You probably just want to use var. So that's the experiment. Let's give it a whirl. So I'm going to have some projects up here. This is one of them because I have some notes here that I've been taking to see if this will all work. You can see here's this base thing, or some or whatever. I'm going to, again, have to come up with a name. The other thing I also thought of is maybe having an additional file. Like if you already had a class called partially with a method apply, well, my search isn't going to work. So something I might want to add in the future is an additional file that I can read and say, okay, maybe what you would want to say is actually look for quux flux or p.app, and in your world, that would actually work. And that, because those names don't matter to me, I just have to have something to look for. And then if that doesn't work for you, maybe have the option later on to do special names. Okay. They don't specify the class name. Forget that. That's a bad idea. You have to have something that it is associated with. If you just say apply, well, I think that would work, and that would actually maybe arguably read better. But yeah, I think not. And what's also good about this compared to something I was originally like trying to say, where is the function that you're passing in? What class is it defined on? Whether it's an instance or a static, doesn't matter. Should I put that namespace there? None of that matters here. None of that matters. This is global because I'm going to be creating delegates that work independent of where they're actually coming from. It only matters from the signature of the method. At least, again, that's the hope. So, all that said, I have now created a project here that I use a lot from Rocks to set this all up. And now I need to create I'm going to be copying and pasting a lot of code here. Or not a lot of code, but I've already got something here that works, so I'm going to use a lot of what's here. So we're going to create a receiver. Okay. So we're going to say partially applied receiver, like that. And then we're going to say partially applied receiver. Okay. And then we're going to say, missing usings because reasons. Let's take that name and we're going to put it up here. One thing I've noticed is over this vacation, I've rendered a bunch of videos that I had sitting. So I'm actually now 2 months ahead of schedule. So this video probably won't actually, it definitely won't get out till mid-February. So if this does work, I'm going to actually create probably a special edition video because I want people to see this. But yeah, I've done a lot of renderings, like editing and stuff like that. And one thing I've noticed is the pauses that I do, the times I say I actually cut out more than you probably even hear. Sometimes I can't because it's so close to what I'm saying that it ends up being a kind of an awkward cut. So I don't cut those out. But one of the things I'm going to try to do from now on, and the observations of watching me do videos, is keep the conversation going unless I really have to stop and think for a second. Even in that case, just dead air is really bad unless I'm writing code. And part of the thing I also want to do is not cut out too much of me writing the code itself, because that's why I'm doing these things, is just to, do the coding while I'm doing the video. So live coding, except it's recorded. What was that? This was recorded, taped in front of a live studio audience. Where the studio audience is just me. Okay. So, I don't think we want this to be, if I just say like here, I say partially, apply 3. Now, if I actually go into the syntax visualizer and I come into here, this is going to be a symbol, invocation expression syntax, where it's a member access expression. You have an identifier name, because that's the expression. It's an identifier name of partially, and that will be here. Okay. Partially. I'm probably going to want to make that a constant because I have the feeling I'm going to want to use that in other places. And then the generic name syntax, that I don't think, because if I did like partial by a string, I think in this case what it would try to do, now it's a generic name, which we don't want. We're not going to make it generic. We also want it to be identifier, a name syntax, and it is apply. Okay. All right. So that's what we're looking for. And if we get that, we are good. So that's actually the first one, the receiver. And I'll write tests. I'll definitely be writing tests like I always do. Where do I want to put the constants though? Names, it's not just constants, it's a way to generate things. Naming. I'm actually going to create a class called naming, because I'm going to be naming delegates, I'm going to be naming other things, and I have the feeling I want to have public static class naming. So we want a public const string, partially class name, which is equal to partially, okay, and then public const string partially method name, and then we'll do apply. And maybe this will eventually come into configuration with the additional file thing, but I'm going to say here naming partial class name. The thing is that my confidence is high, and it shouldn't be, because I have the feeling that something along these lines is going to completely crash to the ground. And I was worried about this because I did a while ago a couple of episodes, I'm like, oh, maybe I can create generic attributes in C# and allow you to actually create them in some way. And then when I finally did it, it ended up being completely useless. And I never published those videos, although I've mentioned them now, I think, a couple of times, because they didn't work. And so that's why I spent some time doing some experimentation before I even tried to write the generator, because I'm like, would this actually even work? I think the concept works. It's just all the things I was showing here in this code, in this console app, is what I'm actually writing by hand. I want the generator to write it for me. So that's why I'm hoping this all works. Okay, so the receiver is just going to be a list of those things, and that should actually be good. Although my preference is to have the properties down here. Okay, so we've got the partially applied receiver, and now we want the partially applied generator. So we're going to do this partially applied generator. Okay, and now we're going to copy and paste because we are good people. Well, sort of. We're going to want this public sealed class because we don't need all those. And then we're going to say that. We're going to say we inherit from that because of reasons. And implement it. Thank you. Initialize. We're going to want this, except we want our partially applied receiver. Okay, so now we know we're going to need a method body here. That is obvious. Okay, now I'm also doing this thing here. Yeah, I'm still going to do this because I'm not convinced that this is actually working. Okay, so we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and the unexpected exception descriptor. Where is that? Oh, that's because, yeah, we have descriptors. We're going to want the same thing here. We're going to want a folder descriptors, because that's what I think I'm doing in rocks, right? Yes. And we're going to copy and paste this one. Unexpected, what did I call it? Exception descriptor. Exception descriptor. Okay, except this is going to be partially applied. Descriptor constants. That's actually from, really? Oh, yeah. Usage. So do we have descriptor constants here? Fine, whatever. We can copy and paste that too. Descriptor constants. And again, copying and pasting code is terrible. Now we got that. So now that should go away. Oh, these are in, yeah, descriptors. So we want, did I do that right? Yes, I did. Okay, good. And now we need the help URL builder, because again, that's what we do. We help people build URLs. Where is that? Help URL build. Okay. And we're going to do this. Help URL. This is, as I'm doing more of these source generators and analyzers and all this stuff, there are some classes that I use all over the place, and I should do that here too. Make like a set of stuff in a library and then reference that as I need it. Okay, so I got the builder. We want this to be PA1 because that's our first one, and we're done, right? We have this all here, except we want the generator, which this is that, and then we come over here and we do that, and we say that, and then we say that. Okay, so does it build? Will it blend? Does it run? Can it shuffle? And it does. Good. And I'm almost at the time limit, so in this video, what did I do? I have done a description of partial function application, the design intent of this library and what it's going to do, and we started building things up. So in the next episode, the intent is to get more done on the generator. I don't know how far I'm going to get, but we want more done on this to actually have something in place that we can, use and see if this is really going to do what we want it to do. So thank you all for watching. Leave comments and questions below. See you in the next episode.